Good evening and welcome to Japan Journal with Mal Adams. I am your host. Tonight we examine the shocking political triumph of Donald Trump, who has returned to the presidency with a Republican sweep of the popular vote, the House, and the Senate. Despite numerous criminal indictments, moral scandals, and anti-democratic rhetoric, his supporters celebrate him as a brilliant strategist. Well, that's debatable, and I'm going to show you why. Because history, however, warns us to be cautious of such unchecked power. Tonight, we explore the dangerous parallels between Trump's rise and Adolf Hitler's ascent to power in Germany, illustrating how fragile democracy can be when faced with authoritarian tendencies. This is not just a political story, ladies and gentlemen. It is a wake-up call for all who cherish liberty. Stay right there. The full details coming up right here on this edition of Japan Journal.
You're tapped into Japan Journal with Mal Adams, the internet's #1 weekly English language online cybercast from Japan, streaming on GNN, the Global News Network, a division of Totown Communications Company, Limited, Japan.
Hello again, everybody. We're back. Let's begin with the shock of the 2024 election results, which I'm just getting over recently. I didn't have time to do a lot of post-production on this piece. I wanted to get it out. We've been busy, got a lot on the table here. But if you cooperate with me and visualize these things in your mind's eye, visualize election night footage, maps turning red and crowds cheering. And let me say that the 2024 election was a turning point in history. Donald Trump, defying polls and political analysts, claimed not only the Electoral College, but also the popular vote. This extraordinary feat was compounded by a Republican takeover of Congress, leaving the Democratic Party in disarray. Many factors contributed to Trump's victory, from economic uncertainty to cultural divisions. His ability to energize his base while exploiting disinformation proved decisive. Voters across key swing states turned out in record numbers, motivated by a mix of resentment and fervent belief in Trump's promises to restore American greatness. But such victories are not without precedent. Historical moments of deep societal division and economic stress often create fertile ground for authoritarian leaders. Understanding this context is critical to grasping the risks posed by another Trump presidency. Trust me when I tell you. Let's go to the role of charisma in leadership. Can we talk about that? Well, then work with me, and in your mind's eye, once again, visualize Trump at a rally, juxtaposed with Hitler speaking to a crowd. You got that image in your head? So we're talking about charisma. And charisma has long been a double-edged sword in politics. Donald Trump, like Adolf Hitler, is a master of crowd psychology. Their speeches, though vastly different in content and style, both appeal to emotion over reason. You hear what I said? They appeal to emotion over reason, creating deep loyalty among their followers. Now, Hitler's ability to connect with the German people was key to his rise. He presented himself as the savior of a humiliated nation, promising to restore pride and stability. Trump similarly frames himself as the champion of forgotten Americans, portraying political opponents and media critics as enemies of the people. The danger lies in how this charisma shields leaders from accountability. History teaches us that when a leader becomes the sole focus of a political movement, institutions and norms are often sacrificed in their name. So let's talk about economic despair as a catalyst. Visualize with me once again, won't you? Depression-era breadlines juxtaposed with modern-day inflation protests. That's the scenario. Economic despair has historically driven voters toward leaders who promise radical change. In post-World War I Germany, hyperinflation and unemployment created a sense of desperation that Hitler exploited. In America today, economic challenges such as inflation, wage stagnation, and the fallout from global trade wars have similarly fueled frustration. Trump's campaign successfully channeled this anger, blaming immigrants, foreign nations, and political elites for the nation's woes. Now, such rhetoric distracts from systemic issues, providing simple scapegoats rather than sustainable solutions. Economic distress can make voters vulnerable to authoritarian leaders, a pattern we must work to break by addressing root causes rather than resorting to division. We got to talk about the power of propaganda, though. Visualize with me, once again, if you will, Nazi propaganda juxtaposed with Trump social media campaigns. And what you have is propaganda. And propaganda is one of the most powerful tools of authoritarian regimes. Adolf Hitler understood this well, creating a ministry dedicated to shaping public opinion through controlled media. Heard that before? Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda chief, famously stated, quote, "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it," end quote. Well, Trump's media strategy mirrors this approach in many ways. By leveraging social media platforms and conservative news outlets, can you say Fox News? Trump amplifies his narratives while undermining trust in traditional journalism. The phrase fake news has become a weapon to discredit opposing viewpoints. So when propaganda takes root, the truth becomes malleable and democracy suffers. The rise of alternative facts and conspiracy theories under Trump is a stark reminder of how fragile informed discourse can become. We got to talk about scapegoating and division. These are the tools he used, you see. So visualize once again, if you will, protesters clashing, followed by historical footage of Nazi allies and in rallies. And what you have is what both Hitler and Trump relied on, that is scapegoating to unify their base. For Hitler, it was Jews, communists, and intellectuals. For Trump, it has been immigrants, Muslims, political adversaries, and people of color. Such tactics foster an us versus them mentality, eroding trust and sowing division. In Germany, this led to systemic persecution and eventually genocide. While America has not reached such extremes, the rhetoric of division has already resulted in violence and erosion of democratic norms. Follow me. We must reject scapegoating and instead seek solutions that unite rather than divide. You follow? I believe that history warns us that the consequences of unchecked division can be catastrophic. Let's talk about attacks on democratic norms. Trump's disregard for democratic institutions echoes early warning signs from Hitler's era. Both leaders sought to delegitimize their opposition, attacking the judiciary, media, and electoral processes. Hitler's Reichstag fire decree, you remember that? Oh, it was a false flag thing for sure. He burnt the damn Reichstag down. Trust me on that. But his Reichstag fire decree dismantled Germany's democracy, pure and simple, paving the way for dictatorship. Be mindful of such tricks that Trump may be scheming up to do the same or with the same effect, because similarly, Trump's baseless claims of election fraud and efforts to overturn legitimate results undermine public trust in democratic processes. The January 6th insurrection exemplifies how rhetoric can incite violence, threatening the foundations of governance. Protecting democracy and democratic norms requires vigilance, y'all. Erosion begins subtly with the normalization of authoritarian behaviors, but its effects can be devastating. Trust me when I tell you. Then we got to talk about judicial overreach. Both Hitler and Trump sought to reshape the judiciary to serve their agendas. Hitler used laws to justify oppression, while Trump appointed judges with loyalty over impartiality. The weaponization of the judiciary creates a dangerous precedent, turning courts into political tools. This undermines the rule of law and creates conditions for unchecked executive power. Trust me when I tell you. You know, preserving judicial independence is essential for democracy, right? It acts as a check on authoritarian impulses, ensuring leaders remain accountable to the Constitution. Militarization of rhetoric is also a factor here. Hitler relied on militaristic rhetoric to unify and mobilize his base. Trump's invocation of law and order and threats against protesters echo this strategy. Such language normalizes violence as a political tool, eroding civil discourse. History shows that militaristic rhetoric often precedes authoritarian crackdowns on dissent. We must hold leaders accountable for their words, recognizing that rhetoric shapes actions and consequences. Now let's talk about the danger of absolute power, okay? I got a quote for you here. You'll recall Lord Acton. He famously wrote, quote, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Well, Hitler's unchecked authority allowed him to enact policies that led to global war and genocide. Trump's consolidation of power raises similar concerns, from pardoning allies to pressuring agencies. His actions reflect a disregard for checks and balances. Watch him now, because he's going to shut down the Department of Education and others, right? Democracy thrives on accountability, not absolutism. We must resist the concentration of power to protect liberty and justice. There are so many historical warnings to back up what I'm presenting to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. History is rich with examples of democracies falling to authoritarianism. From Rome to Weimar Germany, the warning signs are clear. Complacency and polarization are democracy's greatest enemies, y'all. Trump's rise follows this pattern, using division and fear to erode trust in institutions. Recognizing these signs is the first step to countering them. By studying history, we arm ourselves with the knowledge to prevent its darkest chapters from repeating. And we got to consider the global implications here. The rise of authoritarianism in America sends shockwaves globally. Allies question U.S. leadership. I live in a country not of my birth, but I'm in self-imposed exile here in Japan for close to 50 years. And trust me, I can read what they're thinking. And if it's not the government aligning themselves with American power, you certainly hear it from the people. So allies question U.S. leadership, while adversaries exploit divisions. Trump's policies and rhetoric weaken international norms, emboldening other autocrats. This creates a more volatile world, threatening peace and cooperation. Democracy must not only be defended domestically, but championed internationally. America's actions set a precedent for others to follow. You got to know that. And of course, there's a civic responsibility, right? Democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires active participation and vigilance from us, its citizens. Standing against authoritarianism means more than voting. It means educating others. It means advocating for justice. And it means holding leaders accountable. Our collective responsibility is to protect democracy for future generations. The stakes are so high. They're too high for complacency, y'all. Trust me when I tell you. So in closing, bear with me here and visualize once more this in your mind's eye. You've got diverse Americans voting, interspersed with civil rights footing. You got that image? Because what I want to say is that the rise of Donald Trump is a test of America's democratic resilience. History warns us of the dangers of unchecked power and the cost of complacency. Let us not repeat the mistakes of the past. Together, we must protect the principles that define us as a nation. So here's my call to action, and here's my last visual. Get in your mind's eye an American flag with a text overlay that says, defend democracy. And what I'll say to you is that now is the time to act. Vote, organize, advocate, and above all, remain vigilant. Democracy depends on you. Stand up for liberty, justice, and the future of our nation. God bless you, and may God bless America. I'm your brother Mal, bidding you sayonara from Japan until we meet again. Peace.
You're tapped into Japan Journal with Mal Adams, the internet's #1 weekly English language online cybercast from Japan, streaming on GNN, the global news network, a division of Totown Communications Company, Limited, Japan.